Last episode, I left you staring at a thumbprint inside a 2,400-year-old shield, a craftsperson speaking through the wood, a signature no one signed. Today, we go inside another body, but this time the surprise is not what someone left behind. It is what someone put there. In a small church crypt in the Austrian Alps, a priest has been lying in an open glass case for 280 years. His face still has skin. His chest is intact. His hands fold across his belly the way you would expect a clergyman's hands to fold. For centuries, the villagers called him a miracle. Pilgrims walked up the hill to pray at his feet. Mothers brought sick children. The local rumor said God had refused to let him decay. In May 2025, a pathologist in Munich named Andreas Nerlich finally answered the riddle. He published it in Frontiers in Medicine. And the answer was not a miracle. The answer was fir wood chips, spruce twigs, hemp, linen, a piece of crocheted cotton with a floral pattern, a small glass bead from a rosary, and 942,000 micrograms per kilogram of zinc chloride. Someone in 1746 packed all of that inside this man's body, through his rectum, without leaving a single mark on his skin. And the most disturbing part is not the root. The most disturbing part is that this technique does not exist in a single embalming manual from the period. Whoever did this knew something the textbooks never knew. They did it once. They walked away, and we are only catching up to them now. This is the story of the Air-Dried Chaplain. The hill is small. The village is smaller. Walk from one end of St. Thomas am Blasenstein to the other, and you do it in minutes. The name translates awkwardly to St. Thomas on Bladder Stone. It sits above the north bank of the Danube in Upper Austria. In 1746, it had a stone parish church, a cluster of timber houses, a few hundred souls, and a single resident priest. His name was Franz Xaver Sidler von Rosenegg. In some old parish books, the spelling drifts to Sidler. He was born in 1709 in another hill village called Rectum. He was the 13th child of a minor Habsburg civil servant. By the time he came along, the family inheritance was a memory, so Franz was given to God, the way 13th sons often were. He entered the Augustinian monastery at Waldhausen as a boy, took orders in his 20s, and around 1740 he was assigned to St. Thomas as parish vicar. He served 6 years. He never finished the 7th. What we know about Franz, we know from his bones and his teeth, and the carbon and nitrogen locked into the protein of his hair. He ate well, roast meat, freshwater fish from the Danube, the table of a man whose parish supported him. He did not work with his hands. He had the skeleton of someone who wrote, walked from altar to rectory, and occasionally rode a horse along the river roads. He smoked heavily. The chewing surfaces of his upper front teeth show a curved groove worn smooth by years of clenching a pipe stem in exactly the same place. You can almost see him sitting in a stone-cold rectory in February, the wind howling outside, a pipe in his mouth, a book in his lap, and every breath drawing soot into lungs that were already starting to fail. Because Franz was dying, he had tuberculosis, not the slow, romantic kind that 19th-century poets wrote sonnets about. The other kind, cavitating, hemorrhaging, productive tuberculosis. By the summer of 1746, his hair chemistry shows he was wasting. Losing weight, the disease was eating him from the inside. On the 3rd of September 1746, he coughed blood for the last time. The bleed came from a cavity in his right lower lung. He died in the rectory. He was 37 years old. He left no diary, no letters that survive, no famous saying. He left a body that needed to be buried, and he left it in early September, in the hottest week of the Alpine year. To understand what happened next, you have to understand a problem. In 1746, Austria, you did not embalm an ordinary parish priest. You washed him, you dressed him in his vestments, you laid him out on a wooden board overnight. The village said the rosary. The next morning, you carried him down into the crypt, slid him into a niche in the wall, and you closed the door. That was the whole ritual. Cold stone, dry air, the slow chemistry of time. But Franz had a complication. His home was not St. Thomas. His home was Waldhausen Monastery, a long day's walk away through the river hills. The Augustinians who had raised him from boyhood almost certainly wanted him, returned for burial among his brothers. And St. Thomas itself wanted to honor him. The priests had served them 6 years, 6 years of baptizing their children and burying their parents. They were not going to hurry him into the crypt and forget him. There would be a funeral mass. There might be a procession. There might be a journey of 15 or 20 kilometers through summer heat to the abbey. And it was the first week of September, in a year of hot late summer, with no ice, no refrigeration, no formaldehyde. Formaldehyde would not exist for another 120 years. A human body in those conditions has hours. 24 hours before the gas builds. 48 before the skin starts to slip. By day 3, in 9 degrees Celsius night air and 25 degrees Celsius noon sun, a parish priest stops being a sacred object and starts being a public health problem. Someone in St. Thomas knew this, and someone in St. Thomas knew what to do. We do not know who they were. We do not know if they were a local apothecary, a barber surgeon from a nearby town, a lay brother from Waldhausen sent ahead, or a quiet old woman who had prepared bodies in the village for 40 years. We know only what they did, because they left the receipt inside the body. Imagine the room. A side chamber off the rectory. 1 small window, 2 oil lamps, and a tall candle. The body of Franz Xaver Sidler laid on a long wooden table, washed, naked, draped at the hips with linen. It is well after dark. The village has gone home. Someone is working alone, or perhaps with 1 apprentice. We do not know. In front of them is a basket of fir and spruce. Local wood, free wood. You could gather it in a morning walk through the foothills behind the village. Wood chips and shavings. A handful of small twigs broken off the soft outer branches. The whole basket smells of pine resin, so strong it carries above the candle smoke. Next to the basket, fabric, plain hemp cloth, layered linen, a piece of cotton with a floral crochet ornament, the kind a village woman might keep in a drawer, strips of silk gauze. Some of it is altar cloth. Some of it might be donated. Some of it is wrapped, maybe, around a small glass bead from a broken rosary. A tiny silica sphere with 2 drilled holes, the kind that strings onto prayer beads. That bead is going to matter in 254 years, but the embalmer does not know that. On the table, in a small jar, is the key ingredient, zinc chloride. Stay with me on this. Zinc chloride in 1746 is not a mystery chemical. It can be made from zinc oxide and hydrochloric acid, both of which European apothecaries already produce. It is hygroscopic. That means it pulls water out of anything it touches ferociously. Spill it on cotton. The cotton dries to a chalk in minutes. It is also bactericidal. It kills the organisms that make a corpse rot. An 18th century apothecary, trained in the German tradition, would understand exactly what zinc chloride does. They might not understand bacteria yet, but they would absolutely understand that this salt keeps things from spoiling. The embalmer dissolves the zinc chloride in water. They soak the wood chips and the twigs in the solution. The cellulose drinks it in. The chips are now 100 small chemical sponges. Then comes the part nobody wrote down. They roll the priest onto his side. They part the buttocks. They reach in through the rectum and the sigmoid colon. They begin pushing the soaked wood and the soaked fabric upward, by hand, into the abdominal cavity, higher on the right than on the left, working around the mesentery that divides the belly. Linen first, then cotton, then wood, then more linen, then silk, layer by layer, packing the body from the inside, until the entire abdomen and lower chest are full. There is no incision. The skin is never broken. The chest wall and the abdominal wall stay completely intact. When the work is done and the body is rolled back, Franz looks exactly like a sleeping priest. No sutures, no visible wound, no clue. The work probably takes hours. By dawn, the embalmer washes their hands, blows out the candle, and leaves the rectory. Whoever they were, they walked out into the gray morning of September 4th, 1746, and history forgot them. The funeral was held. We have no detailed record of it. The body was carried not to Waldhausen, but down into the crypt of St. Thomas itself. Whatever plan called for moving Franz back to his abbey fell through. Maybe the road was unsafe. The War of the Austrian Succession was still grinding across the empire. Maybe the abbey was overcrowded. Maybe a messenger arrived too late. Whatever the reason, Franz was laid into the crypt. The stone door closed. The villagers said the rosary. And then time started. Years passed, then decades, then a century. Visitors began to notice that the priest in the crypt did not look the way old priests in crypts usually look. His chest was firm. His abdomen was firm. His hands rested where they had been folded. The lower legs and the face, those started to go. The extremities, untreated, did what extremities do, but the trunk held. A body that should be bones with skin. In a Catholic village in Counter-Reformation Europe, there is only one word for that. Miracle. The cult of the incorrupt body was at the heart of 18th century Catholic piety. A corpse that refuses to decay is a corpse that heaven willed to keep whole. The villagers believed this. They believed it for centuries. There is a small heartbreak in here, if you let yourself feel it. Around the same year Franz died, a Roman canon lawyer named Prospero Lambertini, the future Pope Benedict XIV, was finishing a treatise called De Cadaverum Incorruption. On the incorruption of cadavers, Lambertini argued with cold legal precision that bodies preserved by embalming, cold air, or accident could not count as miracles. Real incorruptibility had to be inexplicable. He was a skeptic. He was right to be a skeptic. But his skepticism lived in Rome. It did not climb the hill to St. Thomas and Blasenstein. In the village, Franz was holy. Pilgrims came, they prayed, they reported healings, and every year, on the 3rd of September, the parish said a mass for the soul of Franz Xaver Sidler. They said that mass every year without missing one, until the year 1934, 188 years of remembrance. Then the world wars changed everything. The practice quietly ended, and Franz was left in his glass case. Still firm in the chest, still a miracle nobody was performing the ritual for anymore. The first real attempt to look inside Franz happened around the year 2000. An anthropologist named Bernhard Meyer arranged for an external study and a series of X-rays. This was decades before high-resolution CT was routinely available for historical mummies. The X-rays came back grainy. They showed something striking. A small, dense object, bullet-shaped, sitting in the lower abdomen. The interpretation went sideways almost immediately. Some commentators suggested the dense object might be a capsule. Maybe glass, maybe metal, maybe poison, a poisoned priest. A vicar murdered in 1746 in a quiet Austrian village. The story is so good, you can almost feel the tabloid editors typing. It was not true. None of it was true. The bead, and that is what it was, a bead, not a capsule, would not be properly identified for another 2 decades. The wood chips, the fabric, the zinc, the silk, the linen, the entire actual story of how Franz's body survived, sat unseen inside him the whole time. The X-ray could only catch the dense objects. The soft organic packing was invisible to it. Picture this. The answer to a 280-year mystery was inside Franz the entire time. The data was there. Only the lens was wrong. For 20 more years, the wrong story circulated. A village priest, mistaken for a poisoning victim, because the imaging technology of the year 2000 could not see fir wood chips. This is one of the quiet lessons of historical science. The information almost always survives. We just have to wait for the right machine. The right machine arrived because of a leak. Sometime in the early 2020s, a water leak damaged the crypt of St. Thomas and Blasenstein. The walls needed work. The mummy needed to come out. It is hard to overstate how rare this kind of access is. A church crypt does not normally agree to wheel a clergyman's body to a hospital, but the renovation forced the question, and Andreas Nerlich, a paleopathologist at Ludwig Maximilian University of Munich, got his window. Nerlich is the kind of scientist who has spent his career staring at people who died centuries before he was born. He has examined Egyptian mummies, plague victims, medieval bishops. He brought Franz to the LMU teaching hospital. He brought a full CT scanner. He brought a forensic toxicologist. He brought a botanist, Ablot stable isotopes analysts, and radiocarbon dating equipment. The CT machine cycled. The slices came up on the workstation screen, and there, where soft organs should have been, was a snowfall of bright, dense points. Wood, layered fabric, heavier on the right than on the left, following the curve of the mesentery exactly the way a careful hand would have placed it. The team identified fir and spruce by their cellular structure under microscopy. The textile analysis recognized plain weave hemp, multiple linen layers, cotton with crocheted floral ornament, and elaborate silk gauze. Toxicology came back with the numbers that broke the case open. 942,000 micrograms of zinc per kilogram of tissue, 15 times the upper reference value. Copper elevated to 72,000. Trace arsenic, almost certainly an impurity in the zinc preparation. And on the abdominal wall, nothing. No incision, no scar, no surgical entry point. The skin was intact, 360 degrees around the trunk. There was only one anatomical route into a sealed cavity, the rectum. When CNN asked Nerlich to put it in plain words, he did not perform. He just said it the way a scientist says a thing he has already accepted as true. The chips and the fabric, he explained, would have bound the water. The zinc chloride would have dried the tissue and reduced the bacterial load in the bowel. On why the technique was used, he was careful. Possibly, the vicar was planned for transportation to his home abbey, which might have failed for unknown reasons. And in the paper itself, on the 2nd of May 2025, in Frontiers in Medicine, the team wrote the sentence that turns a curiosity into a discovery. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first report on this type of conservation of a mummy, in particular the internal packing and chemical preparation via an anal route. First report. In 280 years, that sentence is doing a lot of work. It does not say, the only case. It says, the first reported. Which means there could be others, buried in soil, decayed normally gone. Every Central European incorrupt body in a crypt from the 1700s is now a candidate for re-examination. Franz might be the one survivor of a vanished practice, the one receipt that did not burn. So what does Franz Xaver Sidler leave us? 280 years after he stopped breathing. He leaves us a body. He leaves us a chemistry signature. He leaves us a method that no 18th century textbook bothered to record. He leaves us an embalmer we will never name. But what he leaves us most is a way of looking at history. When we see a result we cannot explain, we tend to reach for one of two answers: miracle or accident. The village reached for miracle. The 2000 X-ray reached for accident and then for tabloid. Both were wrong in the same way. They both assumed the 18th century could not have known what it was doing. The 18th century did not have peer review. It did not require chemistry to be published. It did not treat embalming as a documented craft. But it had people. Apothecaries who knew their salts. Lay brothers who knew their woods. Village women who knew how to lay out a body. Quiet, skilled humans whose names never reached a printed page. They did the work. They taught it, maybe to one apprentice. And then they died, and the apprentice died, and the skill died with them. Unless one of those quiet humans happened to work on a body that ended up in a dry Alpine crypt behind a glass door, watched over by a village that believed. Franz Sidler is the man who refused to rot. But the real survivor in this story is the embalmer. They have no name. We will never reconstruct their face the way we reconstructed Franz's diet from his hair. But every time a CT scanner cycles over a centuries-old body and lights up something unexpected, they are speaking. A craftsperson signing in materials 280 years late. Remember the Avsaruda spring shield. A thumbprint pressed into wood 2,400 years ago by a Danish craftsperson we will never identify. Remember Franz's belly, fur chips and linen and zinc, placed by an Austrian craftsperson we will never identify. The bodies and the boats keep the receipts, and someone, eventually, learns to read them. Which raises the next question. What if a body could keep the receipt of an entire industry? What if the body itself glowed in the dark because of what someone had done to it? In the 1920s, in a watch factory in New Jersey, a group of young women dipped fine paintbrushes into a glowing green paint. To get a sharper tip, they pressed the brush between their lips. They did it hundreds of times a day, and the radium they were swallowing did not leave when they died. It stayed in their bones. It is still in their bones today. Their skeletons are now archaeological objects, bodies that became chemical archives of a practice nobody at the time would admit was killing them. Next episode, we go inside those women, the radium girls, and we read what their bones are still trying to tell us. History keeps writing receipts. Until next time. Title, suggestions. 5 options. 1. The 280-year-old priest embalmed through his rectum. 2. An Austrian mummy was lying to us for 280 years. 3. The embalmer with no name. 1246, Austria's hidden method. 4. They called him a miracle. He was full of wood chips. 5. The Air-Dried Chaplain. Solved in 2025.